Hi friends, welcome once again to this module of NPTEL on strategic trade and protectionism, theories and empirics. We have already began with two lectures which broadly talks about how India actually plans for a strategy vis-a-vis many other challenges, and why protectionism is so required in Indian context. Given the fact that we have so many challenges, so many game theoretic strategy developed by competing countries, especially China. So, we are the neighboring country, though with the neighboring Asian country with China, our strategy at this stage is very pertinent. So, friends, what I try to proceed with this lecture is on emphasizing some of the latest facts how India is connected to the globe, especially in terms of its exports, imports, and its deficits, balance of payment problems, and current account deficits. And also we are supposed to know to understand the empirics on trade strategies. You are also supposed to know very clearly on what is called the directions of trade, why trade. So, we have already discussed a bit of it in the last two lectures. This is our third lecture. So, myself Dr. Pratap C. Mohanty as a faculty member of Humanities and Social Science Department of IIT Roorkee. Now, out of the 20 lectures, this is the third one. I mean, in the first week itself, we are trying to develop a complete background of international trade in order to go for understanding theory. So, while understanding or capturing the background, we are also supposed to know some of the important cases like East Asian crisis, bubble in the West gets burst. So, some of the things are actually captured in today's lecture. And so, as an anecdote to this lecture, let me mention that mention very clearly that latest facts are collected from which sources. That is very important. Those who are serious in pursuing higher studies on international trade and doing research on international trade, they are supposed to know the exact source of the data. So, we have Ministry of Commerce dedicated for this sector. Ministry of Commerce, under this aegis of Ministry of Commerce, we have called DGFT, Director General of Foreign Trade, which I have mentioned in this slide only. DGFT, for your clarification, let me mention to you, DGFT is here, is clearly mentioned, Director General of Foreign Trade. And also the most authentic source of international trade data is India's trade portal, another source, UN Comtrade as well as India's Comtrade and Reserve Bank of India. Since it is the macroeconomics facts collected from various sources, various other international bodies like IMF, WTO are the pioneering organizations behind the database we are going to capture. Now, so why is it so required? My only concern here to explain international trade and to derive exact theories and strategies of trade for better protection to India's trade. We are supposed to understand why these facts. The first point I have thought of understanding is in the context of big country versus small country arguments. So, in some sense big country gets benefited, and in other sense small country also gets benefited. So, protecting by usually the myths we have in research in international trade that big country always have win-win situation as against the small countries, which is a myth, which is actually a myth. And so therefore, we need to understand big in the sense what kind of big, is it the big market in terms of demand and supply. So, demand defines big or supply side defines big. So, we need to understand from the data. So, our data in this lecture captures facts very clearly, recent facts, very latest facts for the understanding of big versus small countries. So, accordingly we can plan for trade protectionism and strategic trade. So, then next idea of collecting data is also to understand what data. Data in isolation is nothing. Data just describing by its descriptive natures is nothing unless we attach to the exact theories on it or the exact theoretical connections to it or the theoretical construct to explain many complex situations. So, another aspect is I have already pointed out in the last class that we are supposed to understand intra-industry trade versus inter-industry trade through the data. Let me point out in this particular context that India and many other developing countries are actually tapping the best benefit in this segment, intra-industry trade segment, because of the fact that which the one theoretical reasons behind this is differentiated products, and that too differentiated products are derived based on differentiated demand, and India is poised with huge population. We have different sections of population with different income groups, and therefore, we have variety of demand. So, variety of demand calls for differentiated products and hence intra-industry trade. So, this is what I have already explained in the previous lecture with a rough diagram on it. Then we have certain data to justify to this argument also. Especially I will emphasize some aspects of import contains in the exports basket. So, that means what is the replacement cost of import and how much value added Indian government or Indian exporters do. So, therefore, trade is beneficial, and that is very important additions to the theories, and this was developed by many theories, especially the major credit goes to Krugman in his piece of literature on intra-industry trade, and they derived the argument behind this through Leontief input output analysis. Then besides that we have, once we have understood intra-industry and inter-industry segments in our trade basket, we are supposed to know how much it protects to our country if the country is actually imposing some kind of restrictions as against another one. So, just protection is not enough. So, effective protection is important. So, we are going to talk about what is called effective protection. So, how much protection for the raw materials or the intermediate goods are actually very important for countries internal development. So, that is another aspect should be emphasized, and we have dedicated sessions for these points. Then, so we have once understood this, we are also supposed to know different extent of tariffs and non-tariff measures. So, percentage of tariffs and non-tariff barriers imposed by different countries, I have already discussed in the last class. Then another strategy, as I also pointed out, called trade creation versus trade diversion. So, how trade is created among some countries and how trade is diverted. A classic example or the very latest example for this is Eurozone. Being a member in the Eurozone or excluding themselves from the Eurozone actually differentiate their position and accordingly they are cut off from some countries, while they are adding certain values with new member countries. So, this is one set of data set which will be clarifying things in a better way. So, therefore, when we emphasize trade creation versus trade diversion, we are supposed to know trade blocks. We are actually trying to understand regionalism versus multilateralism concept in this connection. Now, another aspect theory which is connected to data emphasized by Professor Jagdish Bhagwati in his very earlier work, 1957 work, where Jagdish Bhagwati derived a context where many developing countries, especially India, is actually suffering in its terms of trade content of its basket of products. Especially the countries which are overemphasizing their some varieties of product in their export basket derive less advantage to their terms of trade. And what do you mean by terms of trade? This is export prices of export to price of imports. So, when we have overemphasization of exports of same varieties, that will undermine its competitiveness in the international market. Though it captures market, but so far as the pricing strategies are concerned, it may derive lower value. So, which was actually emphasized by Professor Bhagwati in the context of agricultural products, mostly agricultural products, mostly or textile or the low end varieties products exported by India. So, now we need to actually check how much or which content of export to which direction of exports and how much re-exporting we do from this, and we can able to validate Professor Jagdish Bhagwati's concept of immersion growth rate. So, therefore, facts are very important as an anecdote to the understanding of all of the theories. So, let us dig down further in explaining the terms of trade or even the immersion growth rate, intra-industry trade, then to some extent why regionalism is possible. If you do not understand the nature of products, nature type of countries, it is too difficult to understand. I have already talked about this slide, but I did not emphasize in the last class. Therefore, it is our duty to start with in detail. Now, this slide is very recent, just in 1 week back economic survey was presented in our parliament. So, this is the very latest database. We try to capture different years and its comparison to understand export growth rate in terms of US dollar, then import growth rate, then current account balance, then its connection with foreign exchange reserves or average exchange rate, which are very important points of international trade. Now, merchandise exports which are broadly discussed as exports of commodities. Now, there have been by percentage if you look at as compared to its previous year, it is negative and steadily increasing, but very recently it is not picking up because there are some cyclical changes taking place. And now, if you look at import growth rate in terms of US dollar term, similarly our import growth rate is much higher than that of export growth rate. So, we have higher dependence on imports as compared to exports. So, therefore, there are high chances of current account deficit. If you look at international basket and its dependence of export and import, Current account deficit is explained in negative terms. Now, this has been increased since our dependence is much higher on imports. So, now one of the paradoxical note to current account deficit is our higher exchange rate reserves. That is majorly corroborated by higher remittances from many countries, especially Gulf countries and Middle East countries. Our exchange rate is quite in a darker side. It is not improving, but since our dependence is heavy on foreign products, so therefore foreign demand. So, foreign products, our tourism sector is not also rising. So, therefore, some of the connotations can be derived here in later lectures. Now, to understand international trade and its dimensions very clearly, balance of payment should be also understood in detail. So, what do you mean by balance of payment? It is basically a detailed record, an accounting record of all transactions take place between the member countries or the home country as compared to the partner countries, especially within 1 year. So, it is basically an accounting record which follows a double accounting bookkeeping pattern to record all its details. So, broadly we have 3 accounts under balance of payment: current account. In the next slide I will talk about capital account. Then third one is majorly called reserves account. So, first one is called current account, which captures the mercantile trade and services. So, mercantile trades broadly covers these exports and imports of goods, and invisibles where services are actually included. In these two cases, if you look at over the years and even in last quarter as well, which is available in our latest economic survey data, report, exports, the changes we have already seen in the previous lecture. So, I just here to point out how here in the net sense called current account balance, which takes care of exports, imports and invisibles. So, we have negative, the rate is actually becoming higher. So, therefore, the current account deficit is actually rising. Now, in capital account segment where the transactions are broadly of 2 types, majorly of 2 types: FDI segment, we have an FDI foreign investment segment, portfolio investment. There are other investment channels also like external assistance, external commercial borrowings and short term credit, banking capitals. So, in total we have capital account adjustment as well. While there are some imbalances in the current account, capital account can be adjusted to that extent, and if there is any mismatch, so reserve account actually makes its balance. So, accordingly we get balance of payment pictures. Now, what we have observed here from the slide is that India's current account is in deficit. Now, as a background to current account and capital account and our transaction for our currency is concerned, and accordingly the average demand of our national currency Indian rupee is concerned, we are supposed to know that why is it the case that Indian currency in the capital account is not demanded so much. One of the very important reasons behind the less demand for Indian rupees is the fact that it is not convertible in capital account. Though, do you understand convertibility in capital account? Okay, so so there was basically a committee constituted called Tarapur committee. Do you know this? No, not exactly. So, Tarapur committee was constituted for this particular purpose in understanding or making our currency to be convertible in any of the accounts. So, after the Tarapur committee which was set off, only permission was granted where current account has been made convertible in all its transactions. So, now we can understand current account, any kind of transactions under current account where Indian rupee can be easily transacted. Where is any channels of capital account, Indian rupees is not being demanded. So, since Indian rupees are not demanded and the bulk of the investment are through capital account, so our rupees is not demanded. So, the value of rupee is actually decelerated. Now, there are again gamut of discussions which are very important for Indian context as compared to Chinese context. When we try to understand rupees devaluation strategy, some country go for devaluation, some country go for revaluation of rupees. So, China deliberately devalue its currencies. So, in order to attract various forms of international demand. So, again those are the discussion, we can defer it to other section. So, at this moment I do not think we have enough time to spare for those aspects. So, but the facts are very important, why capital account, current account is important, direction of trade is important. I have already discussed here on the deficits, but now the important fact, the matter of contention here is in comparing India with advanced countries and emerging countries. So, here is the emerging country and this direction. So, we among the all emerging countries like Brazil, even China, even Russia, South Africa, among many other, Mexico, among all those countries, India is comparatively better off. But the in current account deficit sense, advanced countries are far better than that of those emerging countries. Now, look at current account deficit and trade deficit. So, this side is for trade deficit and this side is for current account deficit as a percentage of GDP. So, we are supposed to actually measure all those things as a percentage of GDP in order to have a better capture. So, we have already seen that 2.6% so far as the latest figure is concerned, CAD, current account deficit, as a percentage of GDP. And this side is quarterly wise clearly defined. Here it is CAD in highlighted in red color, CAD as a percentage of GDP, whereas next side is CAD as a percentage of GDP, but the figure is quarterly. So, there is therefore, it is a continuous series since quarterly pictures are there. Now, similarly trade deficit is total trade deficit is higher, then and its quarterly report is also presented accordingly. Now, what I try to also capture the trade war which we have already discussed in the last class, where very recently we have witnessed US China trade war. Since there are these are the two biggest giants in international market for their products, the trade war may lead to other strategies in other products, especially crude oil. So, crude oil may be actually captured, maybe censored by specific countries who reserve oil. US may take advantage out of it, but there are many interpretations for it. If they capture, they hegemonize the price of it, probably there might be other forms of collusion which might be retaliated by other developing countries based on their unionism. So, therefore, crude oil is a matter of concern because it is steadily rising, increasing. So, therefore, we are supposed to know it in detail. Now, to understand the current account balance, its deficit, here the diagram which present export destination of India as per the latest figure 2018-19. Now, look at our export destination highest by percentage to US as compared to as compared to other countries. And now among topmost top 10 countries, Nepal is one of our export destinations also. So, though it is a very small economy, but now look at the market captured by Nepal. So, therefore, small economy should not be neglected. Now, US followed by UAE, and why UAE? Then what kind of product to UAE, Gulf countries, Arabic countries and Gulf countries, followed by again China. Here I may mention some of the facts. The UAE we re-export, we refine their crude oil, re-export to United Arab Emirates by adding value to it, where we are again emphasizing the concept of IIT, intra-industry trade. And China, how we are dependent on their hardwares, IT hardwares majorly, and we have better capture in softwares. So, we are net exporters of softwares. So, now similarly, if you try to understand top 10 import sources, where we import, where we depend. Now, very ironically, we are exporting much higher to China, we are actually importing from China as well. We are exporting higher amount to US, you are also importing from US, similarly UAE. Now, it seems as if our dependence on those countries is much higher. Now, look at here, Nepal vanished, our dependence on Nepal is not there. Okay. So, we are our export basket derive much value additions from the small countries. So, now let us move to other year capture some time component to the top 10 export destinations 2016 to 18. Now, their percentage growth to US is much positive in these 2 years, and whereas our percentage growth in those 2 years is actually negative. This is a bigger concern for India. Similar to Hong Kong, as in China, these are positive, and in other countries it is much positive as well. So, we do not have any matter of concern in other sections, but especially in UAE context. So, we are not adding value so much to the raw materials we are importing. So, we are supposed to know the raw materials in detail. Now, as compared to these 2 years 17-18, 2017-18 to 2019, now our addition we have net positive again net positive here, then net positive here, but in Hong Kong case it was decelerated in the previous year, again it is decelerated in the very recent years. So, we need to actually understand what are the cases for Hong Kong in our respective section. Why Hong Kong is actually in Hong Kong case we are not re-exporting or not exporting our total value. Similarly, UK is a negative figure as well, we need to understand in their respective section. So far as composition of trade is concerned, products are concerned from its destination countries or the sources of source countries. So, commodities exported in 2018-19 highest amount, look at highest amount here is 14.1% out of the 100% exports captured by petroleum products. This is petroleum products. So, we export, we are the net exporter of petroleum products. Now, it is very surprising to note that we are exporting highest amount, highest value of petroleum products to the producing countries of petroleum products, to especially to Gulf countries. And though we have various pact with Iran and even in some other other Gulf countries as well. Second highest component is gems and jewelry segment, precious metals and also gems and jewelry as well. Drugs also, we are the third largest producer of pharmaceutical products, and similarly iron, organic chemicals, then cotton related accessories, motor vehicles, machineries, equipments, etc. Once you look at its imports baskets, imports composition. As I already said, we import more petrol, crude oil and re-export those things to those countries to get better values. Import also crude gold and process it in our different units, especially in Gujarat and Surat areas, and we re-export it. There are other segments where you can follow it from the slides in detail. Now, these are the further components of mercantile trade and services. We have better capture for services as against mercantile. So, I think this is well explained in our previous lecture as well as couple of minutes back. Now, this is exports of top 10 commodities, we have already said, but this is a time component analysis of it, I have already explained. This is exports of top 10 commodities, this is another time component of it, can be followed from my slides in detail. And now, mercantile trades over time, I have already explained, but earlier look at its growth. We have already corroborated 2-digit growth rate of our GDP. So, there are some negative merchandise trade as well in different years, but look at the rates in these years are much higher. So, our external segment was actually adding much value to our country's growth. And we have huge leverage in the service sector, and it is clearly understood exactly in this year, even in recent years also. Now, I have already said electronic goods, we have re-exporting value is very high, and in import segment negatively attached to precious and semi-precious stones. Now, you can follow other details from these links I have already shared in my PPT. You can look at these links for top 10, top 25 and for imports and export destination. I have already explained this. India is the 7th among all the top 10 countries, and so far as its reserves is concerned, we have the highest, and so far as in international PPP terms, we are the third largest. Look at the volume of the bubble. We have already explained this one we have already explained in the last class, but still for your clarity, growth rate we wanted to mention that we have better growth rate. So, it is much higher than other countries. Growth similarly, you can follow from the slides. India's share in global trade, more or less I have already discussed, no need to discuss in detail. In other years you can follow from my sites, we will emphasize while explaining things in other classes. Remittances wise, as I told you, India is the highest recipient of remittances, therefore, our reserves is very high. Foreign direct investment, we are little low in this segment and as compared to China. So, we need to improve in this particular aspect. So, these details reserve segment as I told you, foreign exchange reserves, it is consistently higher, even much higher than that of any other countries. So, so broadly I talked about the patterns of trade, destination, sources, then re-exporting by value over the time component. We will carry forward some of these facts in terms of strategies to our next class in this week, where we will emphasize some policies which facilitates our trade like this. With this, I think I should stop here. We will explain all rest in the next class. Thank you so much.